everyone. We're in the special business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, July 24th. Alton Swallow and Peace to Ultimate Squamish, Awayamil. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an agenda in front of council. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. I would like to, if council is okay, just because I know there's many audience members interested in moving up the third reading consideration of the Cheek-Eye development to after the public hearing. So it's okay with council. Move adoption of the agenda, moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor, opposed if any, motion carries. I'm moving on, I think, to our last item. Is that true? We've already done that. We are on item 5A1, development permit number 481. Railtown. 39660 Government Road.
Alright, so good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. Tonight we're presenting development permit 481 located at 39660 Government Road, known as Railtown. Development permit 481 is located in the southwest reach of the North Yards neighborhood. The property is outlined in blue on the map on the slide. It's located in the mixed-use district Mud 1 zone along Government Road, just north of the Sea to Sky Business Park. It is located to the east of the rail yard. Currently, a single unit dwelling is located on the property. 39660 Government Road is zoned mixed-use District 1. It was rezoned along with the adjacent parcels to Mud 1 in May of 2017. This project is contained within areas 1, 2, and 3 of the Mud 1 zone. However, the proposed building is almost entirely within Area 3. It's located within Development Permit Area 6, Squamish Industrial Park, established to regulate the form and character of new development in the Sea to Sky Business Park. The property is within a flood hazard area and is entirely within the secondary floodway as shown in the hatched blue above. Because the project is committing to 100% purpose-built rental, it is a priority application. This is the overall site plan. The access and egress from both will be from both Pioneer Way and Government Road. The red arrows highlight vehicle routes, while the blue arrows highlight principal pedestrian movement. A paved pathway is proposed to extend from Pioneer Way to Government Road along the interior of the site, while a line will delineate shared pedestrian vehicle movement along the eastern property line. Class B bicycle parking will be available at both the south and north end of the building, indicated with the green arrows. A bike wash station will be located near the bike room along the eastern lobby entrance, indicated with the blue star. A raised podium in front of the commercial space will provide opportunities for pedestrian activation and exterior seating, separated from vehicle movement. The required open space will be located at the south end of the site. Ramping stairs animate the northern entrance of the building and emulate the ramping stairs used in the building to the east. The photo below highlights this feature. The proposal is for a 4-story building, inclusive of mezzanine with an additional level of enclosed parking. Employment space is proposed at podium level and at mezzanine. Neighborhood commercial is a permitted use at this location, and office space is permitted on the 2nd story and mezzanine level. 27 units of purpose-built market rental residential units are proposed. The proposed building is 4 stories and mezzanine level and enclosed parking. The height is 17 meters, permitted by the zone. The elevator penthouse projects into the height and is an allowable projection, as long as it does not allow for access or egress onto the roof. Some features of the development include corrugated metal cladding, black expanded metal mesh, fiber cement panels in white and charcoal, and stucco siding along the exterior corridor. Staff would like to highlight the accessory space for waste that has been located on site. This has been sized using guidelines for waste for apartment and commercial uses, and will be built using materials that will minimize obstructions of flood and maximize conveyance of floodwaters. Site architectural and landscape plans are provided in Schedules A to D in your report package this evening. A detailed review of the compliance to DPA guidelines can be found in Appendix A of this report. The project complies with the DPA guidelines. Above shows the landscape plan. The applicant is providing 1,200 square meters of activated open space, the equivalent of 15% of the lot area. This is a requirement of the MUD 1 zone. The space is to be activated with a mix of exercise equipment, retained trees, picnic tables, vegetable planters, and log benches. A pathway paved with aqua-paved pavers runs from north to south. A similar pathway exists on the eastern property line with pedestrian space delineated with a painted line. DP 481 was presented to the advisory design panel on February 15, 2018. ADP passed the following resolution, that ADP generally supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations with staff. The slide above highlights some of the changes that were made, including additional lighting throughout, confirmed turning radius for loading trucks and reconfiguration of the loading area, a relocated bike wash station, a better connection from the residential lobby to the commercial space, and a change in the pavers to ensure a smoother surface. In summary, the proposal generally meets and exceeds DPA 6 form and character guidelines. Highlights include the high quality of building material, extensive landscaping and screening of necessary features. Development Permit 481 was posted to the district's development showcase. No requests for a public information meeting were received within the 21-day showcase timeframe. No public information meeting was held. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize Development Permit number 481, subject to the following conditions.
Questions? Councillor Leah.
In the ADP minutes, they talk about a phase 1 and a phase 2. What does that mean?
Through you, Mayor, the applicant has indicated that they wish to pursue rezoning of the southern portion of the site. While staff have indicated that they are not supportive of that at this time, it does come down to final council decision, and that is something that they would pursue in the future. However, we haven't seen any plans or intentions for phase 2.
Okay. What's the connectivity? You can't tell from these drawings how it connects with the building DP that we approved next to it, east of it?
Through you, Mayor, so we have a quick photo there. There will be through this area here a line that delineates pedestrian movement that will go to the end of the site and will connect from the sidewalk here. There's also a right of way for 1.5 meters on this side of the site for pedestrian access, so that should ensure some connectivity between the two sites.
And the green spaces that will cut out at the bottom, is that where those trees and the...
Through you, Mayor, the green space on the subject site will be closer to the south of the site.
Wait, what? So the green space we can see in the architectural drawings is not connected to that building? That green space. No, in the next slide.
Go to the next slide.
The next slide.
Right here. So this green space here.
Yeah, where's that?
This green space is on their site, on the south of the site, along Pioneer Way.
Right. Oh, why is it all the way down there? If the building's being built on the north.
Correct, yes. That's where the applicant proposed that they were going to locate it.
I think there's lots of questions about why the green space wouldn't be closer to the more residential area
Yeah.
than, and essentially we're taking up the more densely employment area and putting green space there. It should be opposite.
I believe it's proposed as a temporary location for that green space because the applicants are proposing to develop the south part of the site, at which point that green space is going to have to be relocated. So it's temporary
Relocated to where?
Where?
to somewhere else on the site.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm lost. So this is a DP. It's got residential. Residential requires some open space in proximity to the building.
I don't believe
So
there's
you're going to get residents to walk through nothing to get to a space,
A temporary.
a
green
temporary space. And then once it's developed in the south part, then where do they go? Like that, how can I approve something when I have no idea what is going to happen in the future?
So there's nothing, I don't believe there's anything in the zoning bylaw that would require that some sort of adjacency for the green spaces has to be on the same property.
But I'm just looking at area 3, area 2, area 1.
Yeah.
Area 1 is supposed to be more, I'm just making this very broad, more employment density and less residential density, and area 3, closer to the north here, it's residential, more residential density and less employment density, and it was done this way very strategically. The green space requirement is part of the residential density piece, at least intuitively it is. So it just doesn't make any sense, particularly if it's temporary and there's no actual plan in front of council to see where the green space would be. In the long term.
Through you, Mayor Heitzman, the provision for green space in the MUD 1 specifically allows for green space to be open space to be shared throughout sites, as in there is not a specific provision that it must be located close to the residential zone. The applicant has indicated that they'll consider moving the open space to the roof of a new building. However, staff have not seen plans nor.
Does a roof make actually substitute for green space?
Through your Mayor, the provision in the MUD 1 zone does allow for open space to be located on top of the building.
Continue and then I'll.
This development was assessed against DP Area 6, which is a guideline in the old OCP. But doesn't seem to strive for the universal guidelines, which this would be under in the new OCP.
No, because the application was submitted before the adoption of the new OCP. So legally, we are assessing it under the OCP that was in existence at the time of the application. And we have a number of applications at development permit stage that are being assessed at that level, because legally we have to.
I'm going to go to Councillor Reese and Councillor Snell, and if you have more questions, Councillor.
Well, I had my hand up about this green space because it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to put it down there and then consider rezoning that site sometime in the future for another building like this. And even if you put it up on the roof, then the question is how the first building people get to the roof of the second building and all the issues around that. So that, notwithstanding the zoning bylaw, didn't seem like a very practical solution. But anyway, that was the reason I had my hand up.
On page 214 in the PDF, it's in schedule attachment 1. It shows that the future building in phase 2, and then the green space moves to the future. They build a plaza in phase 2 in the middle, in that center space where that red line is. That whole square there becomes a green space. Plaza or whatever. It's the same size.
Page 214, you said, Councillor Snell?
Yes.
What bullet number?
It's a site plan and lot coverage. It's in the schedule 2 attachment 1, the first page. Site plan and lot coverage.
A001.
Yeah, A001.
What page is it? In the
It's 214, yeah.
217.
217 at the bottom.
It's 217. 214, I think.
Future needs of that
It's not in that.
Yeah.
Sure, it's 217.
And then at the end of the other one.
While Jonas looks that up, I have another question, Jesse.
There's nothing.
There was a comment in the ADP about lighting. And there's a fine balance between too much lighting and too little lighting. And I know the ADP, the architects love to do architectural lighting, but can you explain to me a little more clearly exactly what the augmentation of lighting is?
The augmentation of lighting was a few additional lighting through the pedestrian areas and in the parking areas.
It wasn't architectural lighting.
It wasn't architectural lighting, no.
Do we have an answer?
Yes, so just confirming that there is no rendering, it just, Councilor Shipley brought up the fact that it says Future Plaza Phase 2. And it actually does resonate, their initial application had something like that in the middle, and then another building down south, and then we found out that the other building that was being proposed wasn't exactly Area 1 type building. So I think the plans have changed to this, and that may be the solution once they're ready to develop the south side of the property. But for now, what's in front of us is the DP application with this temporary landscape area.
On the east side, I'm trying to understand, is that just carport, the back of a carport on the east side? And no windows on the east side, is that, am I seeing the picture correctly? The side facing the other property?
So access to there's tandem parking located on the main level there, garages through there. So there are, and then commercial space on the first two levels. So there are windows for the commercial space above. And then above there's an exterior access to corridor for the residential units.
Okay, so it's like a long balcony and you access your residential unit from that?
Correct.
I'm just gonna say you're lucky Councillor Pryor isn't here because he would not be happy without the 3D fly-through and the context with the development next door, which we have, and we don't have any visuals in front of us. So I'm just channeling Councillor Pryor a little bit. Any more questions, Council? Councillor Elliott.
You know, even for DP Area 6, it talks about siding and massing, and right across the street from this are single-family homes. And so the whole intention of the MUD 1 zone is to move from heavier employment use to a lighter touch as we approach Government Road, so that the interface to the residential neighborhood across the street is a little bit softer. And so I'm not quite sure how this building is, and its massing, is a good interface to what is across the street. It doesn't say residential to me. It says large office block that looks like a rail car. And with a big, tall, black tower. And there's a tiny little single-family home right across the street. So I feel like, I don't know. So I'm just curious how we look at this design and think MUD 1, Area 1. Or 3 or whatever it is.
If I may, when we wrote the MUD 1 zone and went through a process of engaging with the stakeholders in the area, the initial proposal was to sort of have a couple of stories of commercial and then step back the upper stories from the road. And at that point we had a lesser setback at the street, and then it stepped back. And after engagement with the stakeholders and some of them in the field of architecture, it was decided to pull the whole building back and allow a straight wall for efficiency purposes. We did go through a public hearing process, and in the area we didn't have any negative comments about the proposed kind of form and character of the building form. And I think it was with the understanding that this area is in a bit of a transition where we have an older residential stock across the street, and being where it is, it's quite likely that a higher density will eventually be established on the other side of the road as well, going north. So I think it was with that understanding that we designed the zone around it.
Any more questions, council? I don't see any more questions, so I'll make a few comments. There's aspects of this that I like, but I just, as Councillor Elliott articulated, don't think it realizes the goal of what I believe the mud one to be. I don't think the vernacular, I don't think the design is conducive to the neighborhood. I would like to see this visually represented with the building next door so we understand the context and the neighborhoods too across the street. I don't have any of that information in front of me. I actually don't think I have enough information to actually make a decision on this at this point. Councillor Elliott.
I concur. In fact, if we went to a vote, I would vote against this because I don't have what I need to make a good decision. And that whole green space piece confounds me. Like, it's not supportable building a temporary green space down at the end of a lot that no one's using, only to move it and maybe create a plaza, which we don't really know what it looks like. Residents need not just a plaza, but green space. So just the context of the site is missing for me completely.
Councillor Schwab.
Thank you. This is right next to a railway. So this is rental housing right next to a railway. It's going to be low-income housing because of the location of it. So having it, and the 2 floors of employment, I like, and it is next to residential area, but the entire area up to there is pretty heavy industrial. And so having rental housing with 2 floors of employment space seems like a really good transition between housing, and there's higher density there already. We approved a townhouse project there. It's not all single family homes. The passive house project is going in right around here, and so there is higher density going there already. Yeah, I don't mind the look of the project. I think it's pretty industrial, and its massing seems appropriate for this area.
If you'd like to move the motion.
I will move the motion.
Is there a second? There is no second.
Okay.
Could we recommend that we refer it back to staff then, so we can?
I'll move that we refer this back to staff to bring more comprehensive information to a subsequent meeting. Seconded by Councillor Elliott.
Okay. Well, I was going to just add my comments to the comments.
Please go right ahead.
Just to help staff. I don't like that picture. And I guess that's the problem I have with just its interface with the street, because I recall the discussions around the mud zone and the different zones of it, and my recollection of the whatever that road is now, Government Road, part of it was it would be more friendly towards the housing across the street in appearance and uses and so forth, and more industrialized at the back. But this has brought the industrialized right to the front of the street, and so I'd be looking for some softening of that face there in some fashion. I'm not going to prescribe it, but corrugated metal is not necessarily, I mean, I know boxcars and they're not really attractive, but they're functional, and I can see the function of that, but I'd be looking for something that's more attractive at that end. I'm also kind of confused by this green space, and I get the point of the location and the market for it and so forth, but I think also out of all of that, we're trying to make nice places for people to live, and so it doesn't matter what the income level is. I think the green space is a very helpful thing for people, and having it way off somewhere and then I'm going to move somewhere else doesn't quite do it for me. I'd rather have some certainty around that. I take the point that it can be located somewhere else in the mud zone, but I want some certainty around that to see the proximity to this building.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to terminate. I'll move that. Second by Councillor Wace. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. First up on the agenda, we have our public hearing, District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2500, 2017 Amendment Bylaw, General Amendments number 2617, 2018. And as per all your public hearings, I legislatively have to read this statement. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act, to allow the public to make representations to council respecting matters contained in the proposed District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw 2500, 2017 Amendment Bylaw General Amendments number 2617, 2018. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that remarks be restricted to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following the presentation. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the planning department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet and shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or actions of members of council or any other person addressing council. I now call on the planning department to introduce the bylaws. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge a number of chiefs sitting in the room, as well as council members from the Squamish Nation. Thanks for being here. As well as elders, of course. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Gunn. I'm a planner with the District of Squamish. This is Jonas, Director of Community Planning. I am here tonight to provide information about Bylaw 2617 for the public hearing. As you know, the official community plan was adopted in June 2018. During the adoption process, staff noted corrections and improvements to items that could not be addressed mid-process. The staff intent was to initiate amendments following bylaw adoption. Bylaw 2617, which addresses these corrections, was given first and second reading on July 3rd. No changes have been made since the second reading. The bylaw addresses 7 topics, which I'll now speak to. The first is growth management. A number of changes are proposed to section 9.2 growth management boundary. These changes are intended to ensure the OCP policy language closely aligns with municipal authority while still meeting the intended policy direction of the adopted OCP. Development is directed within the growth management boundary until substantial completion of residential infill opportunities has been achieved, defined as the district reaching a population of 34,000 or construction being completed for 75% of the development potential. Growth outside the growth management boundary would only be considered when appropriate district policy precursors are adopted and the cost of peripheral growth are outweighed by the community benefits of the project. The proposed amendment still maintains the 22,500 population threshold prior to consideration of any development within future residential neighborhood areas. And any policy references to extraordinary community benefits within the bylaw have been removed and replaced with consideration for mitigation and offsetting impacts of future development. The changes are intended to ensure that OCP policy language does not fetter the decision-making of future councils. And it is recognized that council ultimately holds discretionary decision-making authority regarding OCP land use designations and OCP amendments. And zoning amendments. A grammatical error in the natural environment section is proposed for correction. The error is a result of integration of referral agency feedback during the bylaw adoption process. The suggestion was to include a reference to electric vehicle use in a policy regarding transportation emissions, and the correction really has no major policy impact on the document. 2 additional policies are proposed regarding the Squamish Business Park. These policies were included in the original sub-area plan for the business park and were intended to be included in Bylaw 2500. The policies relate to encouraging open space for employees and visitors to the park. Figure 29-1 in the park is proposed for replacement to correct an error. The error pertains to the artisan building and adjacent single unit parcels, which are circled in red on the screen. Figure 29.1 reflects land use designations, and it's intended to match the land use designation map Schedule B. Unfortunately, there's a discrepancy between the land use schedule map B and this figure, with the Schedule B being the correct and intended version. So this figure is intended to be amended to match Schedule B. In the figure, mixed employment in the area circled in red will be changed to downtown commercial center. There's also an associated change to DPA Schedule Map M, which I'll speak to in a minute, and it reflects the same change. A housekeeping clarification is proposed for DPA 3 guidelines for clarification. The intent is to clarify that the DPA universal guidelines do not apply to airport development. The universal standards are currently inappropriate given the 10-year challenges in that area, and the changes from general guidelines do not apply to DPA 3 guidelines do not apply. It's not a significant change, just making the text more clear. On Schedule B, a correction to the land use designation is proposed for 2 areas. These are indicated by black hatching in the image on the screen. These parcels were designated limited use in the previous OCP adopted in 2010. They were mistakenly designated facilities, utilities, and transportation corridor in the new OCP. It was just a mapping error in the production of our maps. The intended designation is resource and recreation, which is the replacement for limited use in the new OCP. Finally, the staff proposed replacement of DPA Schedule M to correct 2 issues. Issue 1 pertains to the DPA, which is applied to, or the development permit area, which is applied to the artisan building and adjacent single unit parcels, which I talked about. They're depicted in 29-1, which we're also making a change to. The correction should be matched with the correction from DPA 7 downtown south to DPA 5 commercial center. The second issue in Schedule M, those are the parcels to be changed. The second issue is to expand DPA 10, which is intensive and restricted industrial, from the current extent, which is depicted there, to the image on the right, and that's to correct another mapping error that occurred during the production of the OCP. The staff intention was to ensure the less onerous DPA guidelines apply to this industrial area rather than having the more onerous general universal guidelines applied to that area. With regards to the public hearing, the legislative requirements have been met through the process that we've completed. Notice was published in the Squamish Chief on July 12th and July 19th. Distribution of notices to individuals was not required since the bylaw affected more than 10 parcels with more than 10 owners. The public hearing was included in the district e-news and no comments have been received to date. That concludes the presentation for the purposes of the public hearing.
Thank you. I'll go to council to see if there are any questions for clarification purposes. I don't see anyone. I would now open the floor to the public. I don't have any list of names in front of me, but if someone would like to speak to the OCP changes, please do so by putting your hand in the air and I'll acknowledge you. I will ask for a second time, is there anyone who would like to speak to the public hearing? And are you getting ready to put your hand up, Eric? Come on. Please state your name and your address and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. Perhaps this may be in the more the lines of orientation request, but it does pertain to the OCP in the Chikai Fan land use designations. I've had some correspondence with planning staff earlier this year on this matter. We were very pleased, as I've indicated on several occasions, with the handling of forest industry, Eric Anderson, 38316 Vista Crescent, representing the Squamish and District Forestry Association. This matter is of interest to the Forestry Association and it concerns future lands for forest industry use in the Chikai Fan. And we are very pleased with the handling of our requests and information requests regarding Chikai Fan land use. And there are some parcels that were in the early 2000s dedicated to forest industry use through zoning and through the OCP. However, during the last OCP, 2009, I guess that's how we refer to it, there was some change whereby these industrial lands were redesignated to Greenway Corridor and Recreation. With planning department's support, we've had these lands redesignated back to industrial use, that is restricted industrial use. However, there was a glitch, and this was due to some confusions and miscommunications arising from the zoning that was present on the land. On the west side of the railroad tracks is a parcel which has been used for gravel extraction use. It is Crown land, and it is not zoned I-5, but for another zone. We missed it. My question is whether this may be an opportunity to have our intended and planning department's intended Greenway corridor and recreation land use designation applied to the gravel pit on the west side of the tracks in the Chikai Fan.
Eric, can I just have you just pause for just a
Yes.
moment? I just would like to confer on a procedural matter with Ms. Arthurs here.
Very good.
Thank you. I just want to maybe have you confirm exactly which lands you're talking about. The jeopardy is if you are speaking to lands that are currently under post-public hearing with regard to Chikai development's proposal, then we can't hear a post-public hearing submission. But if it's speaking specifically to the OCP amendments that are in front of us,
Yes.
this public hearing, but just if you could just maybe clarify which piece of land you're talking about, so we can make sure we're procedurally on.
I quite understand. The lands are on the west side of the tracks, so outside of the Chikai development proposal.
Okay.
And I have the parcel numbers and all of that information here in front of me as well. Planner Matt Gunn was our correspondent.
Thank you. You're fine to move ahead. I just wanted to make sure it was not part of the other proposal that's post-public hearing. Thank you.
The forest industry does not have immediate plans for use of this land. However, we do anticipate that we may need some backup log handling lands, and we have agreed with the district staff that these lands are suitable for this purpose. They are zoned for this purpose, except for the gravel pit portion and the road access, which remain at the present time Greenway corridor and recreation. We missed them. This was and on February 22nd, Planning Department communicated with us that the identification of this miss arrived too late for this spring, and that the Planning Department would look for opportunities to address this item as we move through the next stages, unquote. So my question is whether we can address this at this time. You will see on the map in front of you that there is a purple rectangular shape with a round curve on the right-hand side, and it is between two green portions.
Is it this one, Eric?
Below that, the purple striped land where you have your cursor at present, the parcel immediately south of that is coated green is a gravel pit, and it is the only road access across the tracks to the purple land above, which is zoned I-5 for log sorting. So the question is where your cursor is right now, which is a small parcel half the size of the purple above, whether we can at some point agree or find some pathway to have that redesignated to restricted industrial use rather than Greenway corridor.
Thank you. Any additional submissions? Any additional submissions? Go ahead.
Excuse me, I just have the identifying numbers and PID numbers for the parcel, but that is in a nutshell. And perhaps Planning Department may be able to assist us from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask for a second time, is there anyone who would like to make any further submissions? And I'll ask for a third time, is there anyone who would like to make further submissions? Just quickly to staff, this type of change would necessitate going back to public hearing again. but it is something we can consider in a future.
Yes. So this change is on our list of items that should be corrected in the OCP. It was contemplated in this amendment, but I think staff felt there was a little more investigation and discussion that needed to be had to ensure, because it hasn't been something that's been discussed very thoroughly within the department, and so it's on our list, something that we're watching for sure, but we didn't think it was appropriate at this moment since we're trying to push through a number of things that were a bit time sensitive.
Housekeeping oriented.
Yeah, but it is on the list of things that we do consider to be relevant and worthwhile doing.
I'll ask, yep, please come up. Just state your name, we've got your others.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. Eric Anderson again. In response to the information provided by the Planning Department, we are perfectly happy to have this well identified as in a placeholder fashion or on a list for further consideration at this time. We think it is, however, important that we identify it. We have had situations twice during the last 10 years where logging operators have been looking at a scramble for sites to go to for log handling, and this is the only go-to site we have. And the gravel pit itself may be a go-to place if necessary, if circumstances arise, and they have arisen. But at the present time, we're happy with the commitment expressed by the Planning Department to follow up with this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask 3 times. Is there anyone who would like to make any submissions to this public hearing? I will ask for a second time, is there anyone who wishes to make further representations? And I'll ask for a third time, is there anyone who wishes to make further representations? Barring any questions from council, I will declare this public hearing closed and just remind everyone that members of council are not permitted to receive further submissions or hear either a proponent or opponent to an application once the public hearing has been concluded. Any and all communication must be channeled through staff. However, council can consider third reading of the bylaw later in this meeting if they so choose. Thank you very much. We're going to get back into our agenda, but before we do, I promised staff that I'd do this in a public meeting, making an announcement about a new job title for Mr. David Ralston, the manager of municipal infatuation. Thank you for indulging me. Just as a background, the chief wrote a little typo and renamed our municipal engineer to the municipal manager of infatuation. Thinking maybe the reporter's a little crush on you, David. Anyway, moving on to item 4A, we have first consideration of first reading of the District rezoning bylaw number 2011 amendment bylaw CD90 zone Centennial Way number 2529 2018.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Elaine Naseby. I'm a planner with Community Planning. I'm here to present with Laura Prinsick, Municipal Engineer, and Jonas Veliniskas, Director of Community Planning. This evening, staff is bringing forward a rezoning bylaw for council consideration. The rezoning would create a new comprehensive development zone, CD90. The subject parcels, 1701 and 1940 Centennial Way. The subject parcels, the land use designation was amended in the new 2040 OCP that was adopted in June. So the previous OCP from 2009, the lands were designated greenway corridors and recreation. The designation was amended to mixed employment, and that was in recognition of the growing residential population in the area, the need for employment and commercial uses to service that population. There is a growth management schedule that's appended to our OCP, and it does designate these lands or this area as a new neighborhood node. I'm going to read the mixed employment land use designation. It applies to lands intended for a creative, complementary, and flexible mix of employment generating uses in transitional employment and light industrial areas. Supported uses in the mixed employment areas include civic, institutional, artisan, arts, culture, limited retail, business office, professional office, light industrial, residential mixed use, parks and greenways. Actually, I'll go back. And so the land use designation to the east is intensive industrial, and to the west with Brennan Park Recreation Center is greenway corridors and recreation. With regards to zoning, the lands currently have a comprehensive development zoning. They are CD 73, which permits campground use. The land to the west is a municipal-owned parcel zoned P2 assembly. To the south is a townhouse zoning. To the east are industrial and resource zoning. So the two subject parcels are the existing Whistlepunk Hollow RV Adventure Park, which was previously called Eagle Vista RV Resort and Campground. The site is in proximity to Brennan Park Recreation Center and Fields. It's also adjacent to the Corridor Trail. The parcels are bordered by riparian area. To the north is the Mampquam River, Loggers Creek to the south, and to the east is part of the Mampquam River Reunion Project. So the existing site, the two parcels, the proposal breaks those two parcels into three proposed sites as shown on the screen. So site 1 is 1.4 hectares or 2.4 acres in size, and the south parcel, sites 2 and 3, are 3 hectares or 7.5 acres in size. So the campground situated south of the Mampquam River, which we can see in those images, has 61 RV sites, 5 yurts, and a mini golf course. The proposed mixed-use development proposes the following uses. So on the north site, the employment uses would be commercial, retail, and office. And also the residential uses would be apartments and townhomes. The south site, the employment uses light industrial and office. The residential uses, there is a purpose-built apartment building which includes affordable units and townhomes. There's also a proposed childcare facility. This gives an overview of the sizes of those uses that are proposed and the number of housing units. I'm going to walk through the proposed development. So on the north site, what we see in that dashed box is the commercial retail. I'll mention that the two sites do have a grade change on both of them, and the proposal responds to that grade change by stepping up. So I've got this slide and then another slide that is a second level overlay. And what this allows is for there to be concealed parking underneath. So we've got commercial retail that's in proximity to the Loggers Lane and Centennial intersection. Those are the townhomes that would border Centennial Way. The south side, the purple there, is the proposed childcare facility and office at grade. This is the purpose-built apartment building. And then we have market residential, which is a mix of townhomes, duplexes. There are some stacked townhomes and also some loft suites in some of the townhomes. So this is that second level overlay, and again at the Loggers Lane and Centennial intersection. So that second level proposed office as well as apartments, townhomes that would face onto the Mampquam Dike, townhomes on Centennial. This is that light industrial use on the south site with surface parking adjacent to Centennial Way, office, and that purpose-built apartment building. The proposed heights on that north site, that mixed-use building is proposed at 6 stories. The townhomes are 3 stories. And that south site, at the bottom there, we can see the 5-story purpose-built apartment building. The light industrial is 1 floor with mezzanine and 3-story townhomes. So I mentioned that there's riparian bordering the site. So those riparian areas would be preserved, and there is a potential back channel of Loggers Creek that needs to be confirmed and may impact the site plan. There are mature trees on the site, and an arborist report was submitted as part of the application, and those will be reviewed in more detail at time of DP to see whether they can be retained with site fill and building footprints. With regards to flood hazard and servicing, the site is challenging from a flood review perspective. The submitted flood hazard assessment report does satisfactorily address those items. And then adoption of the rezoning is conditional on review and approval by the inspector of dikes. So water and sewer modeling is required. There is a potential for off-site upgrades that may be required, and if they are, they would be costs of the development. There is also, so on the municipal-owned parcel to the west of the subject parcels, 42,000 loggers, a utility corridor is proposed for water and potentially drainage services to the south of that parcel. And from a servicing perspective, directing utilities along this proposed corridor is more practical than extending that servicing up Loggers Lane and along Centennial. With regards to roads and parking, Centennial Way is a truck route, and that will be taken into consideration if this file does progress through development permit and servicing agreement to make sure that the trucks are properly accommodated. The Loggers Lane and Centennial intersection is currently a 5-way stop that would need to be upgraded to accommodate the expected increase in traffic volume. So that's under review as to whether it would be a roundabout or a 4-way, and additional consultation with industrial users to accommodate trucks would occur. The parking in the zone is to meet the District of Squamish parking requirements. So as mentioned, there's 2 concealed sort of underground parking areas on each site. The townhomes on the south side accommodate the parking with driveways and garages. And there is a potential for parallel parking on Centennial Way, but that requires further review, particularly with regards to the truck route. In terms of active transportation, the proposal does have bike and pedestrian connections, not only within the development, but also to the surrounding Brennan Park, bus stops, and the Mampquam River Dike trails. The multi-use corridor trail is proposed to extend along the south side of Centennial Way as a paved and lit 3-meter wide trail. There's a new controlled pedestrian crossing proposed in light of it being a truck route, and that would connect the 2 sites. A trail pavilion, the applicant has proposed to provide as an amenity feature on the Mampquam River Dike, and BC Transit has recommended a new bus stop if this development proceeds, and that would go north of Centennial on Loggers Lane. And there's also the potential for a trail on top of the proposed utility route at 42,000 Loggers Lane. In terms of usable open space, it is provided on both sites. And this rezoning was brought to our advisory design panel for their input on zoning elements. And the advisory design panel did highlight the need for those internal strata roads. They also highlighted the surrounding green space to this site. So the subject bylaw 2529, CD Zone 90 captures the zoning parameters, the land use, and other parameters usually captured in zoning. The applicant has proposed to provide a voluntary community amenity contribution, or CAC, and the district has a draft CAC policy from earlier this year. This first slide shows that the applicant proposes to meet that draft CAC target. And so the applicant proposes to provide 24 affordable housing units, $350,000, in addition, $350,000 towards affordable housing, and then a cash contribution towards active transportation and parks that are in line with that draft policy. In addition to meeting the CAC targets, the application provides improvements to the local neighborhood, including so the provision of purpose-built market rental units, 56 units, that Loggers Lane and Centennial Way intersection upgrade. Paths and trails throughout, including that trail at 42,000 Loggers Lane. The provision of public art to the value of over $100,000. The Dyke Pavilion feature that I mentioned. That childcare facility, which could accommodate approximately 25 children. A bus stop. It would be a simple bus stop on Loggers Lane. And then in line with our new OCP policy, adaptable housing units, so 16 units. The extension of the corridor trail towards this development, public access right-of-ways for trails, Strata Road, and usable open space on the site. In addition, the Mampcram River Access Society has developed a not-for-profit campground on Centennial Way to the northeast of this proposed development, and they don't have water service. There are dike considerations that would need to be addressed, but if it's possible, the proponent proposes to extend water service to that campground. So for district implications, budget, the cost of the Loggers Lane and Centennial intersection would be borne by the proposed development. It's not a DCC project. And for organizational impact, there would be further engineering services department need for review and coordination in terms of the riparian area setbacks and road construction with that intersection. Operations-wise, operations does maintain the corridor trail, so they would extend that maintenance to this corridor trail extension and also to the proposed dike pavilion. In terms of policy, so our new 2040 OCP, this is aligned with district objectives in terms of mixed-use development, employment space, and so forth. As mentioned, this area is designated as a neighborhood node. And so I'll read out that policy. Direct the majority of residential development within the growth management boundary to the following areas. And one is infill of vacant and underutilized lands and brownfield sites within existing neighborhoods. Where it does not align with our OCP is that there is a need for campgrounds in Squamish, and this would mean the loss of a campground that is centrally located in Squamish. So the mixed-use development incorporates a range of uses in close proximity, which contributes to a walkable, bikeable community and adds to the need and benefit of transit services. The purpose-built rental apartment building would add to employee housing availability. In terms of public consultation, the applicant did hold a public information meeting May 17th at Brennan Park, and notification was provided to neighbors as well as industrial stakeholders on Centennial Way. And to date, we've had one public comment, and it had concern of the development's proximity to the Mampcram River and the environmental sensitivity of that. So next steps, should this rezoning be adopted, is that a Dike Maintenance Act application is required for all the works within the dike right-of-way. If the drainage for this site requires a storm outfall to Loggers Creek, a Provincial Water Act approval will be required. There are flood hazard items that have been deferred to a detailed design, and those will be addressed at a DP stage of application. So yeah, we would have a DP process and the geotechnical soil report at the building permit stage. I'm about to bring up the staff recommendation, but prior to that slide, there is two items that staff is seeking feedback from council on, and this does have to do with that municipal-owned parcel at 42,000 Loggers Lane. And so one item that is yet to be determined through the rezoning development application process is utilization of the district parcel for a water service corridor of 10 meters width that would run along the south property line. The applicant proposes that they could build a trail atop the water service that would benefit the community for the utilization of the land for that water service. The proposed right-of-way is 10 meters width. The current P2 zoning lot line setback, just for information, is 3 meters. And so staff seeks council direction on the matter of using the district land for the water service, as well as maintenance responsibility for the proposed trail. As it would primarily be used by residents of the development, there is rationale for it to be strata maintained, and the applicant feels that it should be the responsibility of the district for ongoing maintenance. So the staff recommendation this evening is that the rezoning bylaw be given first reading. Prior to scheduling a public hearing, that the following be completed. And so, Mayor, would you like me to read out all of the?
No, we can read.
Okay, so there's a list of items prior to scheduling the public hearing. And an alternative to the staff recommendation, as there are no recommended conditions to be met, any subject prior to second reading, council may wish to give first and second readings and schedule a public hearing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions about the application in front of us?
I'm wondering if there were any comments from the Economic Development Department on the proposed employment space on the proposal. Did it get referred to Economic Development?
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, it did. This file has been in review for some time. So I can't recall exactly what their comments were. I know that the employment land strategy does call on the need for additional employment space, and this rezoning would create additional employment space.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Ms. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilor Rice.
Yeah. The agenda recommendation is just for first reading, and you're suggesting now first and second reading? That's the recommendation?
Through your mayor, as an alternate, staff recommended first reading as it is a somewhat significant land use change zoning bylaw, but there aren't any conditions prior to second. So if council is comfortable giving first and second, that's an option.
Okay, so I had a couple of comments or
Questions still?
questions. Could you go back to that last right away for the water? Just a little confused about where that is. Is that adjacent to the forestry building?
I'll just go back a few slides.
On the south border of the forestry building lot.
Oh, the south border. Gotcha. Okay.
That's really,
I'm curious why housing is along the lot line with the Rod and Gun Club rather than industrial uses. That's confusing to me.
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, it is directly south is the Seven Peaks townhouse development that was recently rezoned and is under construction. And from a planning perspective, staff felt it best to have those uses activating the street. It is Centennial Way as a truck route, and it was felt that that industrial employment use was better sited adjacent to Centennial Way than the other way around.
There's also, if I may add to it, there's also a riparian buffer on that west side.
What's being done for noise mitigation?
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, so one of the staff recommendation prior to adoption is registration of a number of covenants on title, and one would alert the residents and tenants of surrounding industrial noise and other impacts such as dust. Certainly there would be one specific for the Rod and Gun Club, which is, we've done that on other surrounding parcels as well.
I believe in the MUD 1 zone, we actually required the lot closest to actually provide thicker windows and other mechanisms, that was done through rezoning, wasn't it? Rather than just a covenant, there was actually, we required them to provide mitigation for the noise to the rail yard, and I would assume gunfire is equally as annoying.
If I may, through you, Mayor. Yes, that's a good point. We can do this as a condition of the same covenant, not just for alerting about the noise, but also requiring a different standard of windows and insulation along that property line.
And the reason I say this is those, I think those are the smaller townhomes, are they not, along that lot line?
Through Mayor Heinzman, they are townhomes, yes.
So generally family oriented?
Yeah, they're, I
Generally
think,
children go
between,
to bed at a decent hour and want to go to sleep and being woken up. Like the gun club doesn't close till much later. So I think we've got to be really careful about how, is the whole site going to be mitigated against that noise? So I'm really curious about how we're thinking about creating a neighborhood there versus just lots of letters to council and to the Rod and Gun Club. So I want to be really cautious there because it's an existing use. I have more questions, but I'll give up the floor to someone else has questions.
Questions, Councillor Chappelle, and then I'll come back to you.
I did have a question, yes. The water corridor, if we're going to be, is there a lot of maintenance to be done? My concern about us, the development taking on the maintenance is that if we dig it up, maybe there could be a shared agreement. It doesn't have to be one or the other. That if we dig it up for water maintenance, is that a possibility? I just wonder, it's us that's going to be digging it up, but it's going to be 100 years of pipe.
Laura, unless you want to tackle it, I believe this would be a strata water line to the road. So it would have to be maintained by the developer.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a question, and I'll go to Councillor Elliott. I'm wondering, we had the one comment about habitat values along the dike area. Can you speak to any analysis of that? Has there been an analysis of the habitat values that are on the dike there?
through your Mayor Heinzman, not specific to that comment. That comment said that the Mamcram River is an important bird habitat, and there are, the arborist report highlighted that there are eagle nesting trees, but they're to the west of Site 1 on a municipal-owned parcel, so they wouldn't be impacted by this development. There has been the riparian area reports that have been reviewed primarily relate to that Loggers Creek and the Mamcram River Reunion project on Site 2 and 3.
So the lot, portion 1, Site 1 wouldn't require an environmental assessment?
Through your Mayor
Assessment
Heinzman,
might not be the right word, I don't want to.
usually in our development permit process, there would be a site bioinventory that would be required. And that site is certainly in a more disturbed state. It's been sort of I think a bit of a holding ground for the campground operation for a number of years. And also the dike does provide a setback from the Mamcram River, the dike right of way.
Thank you.
Can you point out to me on that map where the bus stop is suggested to be? I couldn't quite understand that from. Or
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, it's
I can't see it on that map.
okay.
Go to a bigger one and
Just the one you were on, and just can you just use the cursor?
In that one.
Yep.
Right.
Is it here?
Yes.
Can you see my mouse?
Yeah. So how are we proposing to do that with the corridor trail there?
So my understanding is that it would be a bus pole as well as a concrete pad that would be on the back side of the corridor trail with a bench.
I think we should rethink that. I think the corridor trail is just going to get busier and busier because now we're putting lighting on it, and I don't think you want. I think we should consider pulling it back in front of our lot potentially.
42,000. Through your Mayor Huntsman, there is,
Because it's just single lane traffic there. So once you come around the traffic circle, the bus will stop right in front of you. And then in terms of people coming off the cycle pathway heading south, if there's a bus stop there, they won't see past it to see who's in the traffic circle. So I'm not sure that that's the best place for it.
through your Mayor Huntsman, staff can certainly look at that. There is a bus stop at Brennan Park, and so when we got the referral from BC Transit, our active transportation staff did contact BC Transit to make sure that it did make sense with regards to the existing bus stop at Brennan Park, and so moving it south might be a bit closer to an existing bus stop, but staff will certainly look at that.
My other question is about parking, and I'm curious, I couldn't figure out from the drawings, because in my PDF, when you try and enlarge them, it's difficult to read all the fine print. So how much visitor parking is there available, and why are we proposing no driveways for some of the site 2, 3, I'm not sure about. We've seen conflicts developing in new neighborhoods where people don't have sufficient lane for people to park on their driveway paths. And I'm wondering why we're supporting this continued friction in neighborhoods that we get to design from the bottom up.
Through your Mayor Heinzman, the application does propose a mix of driveways that are of sufficient length to park a vehicle, and as you pointed out, there are other driveways that are not. That does meet our current District of Squamish zoning bylaw requirement, which asks for either a short driveway to prevent cars from parking out into strata roads, or long enough driveways to accommodate a vehicle. So it does meet our zoning bylaw, and that is why staff has been wants to review whether parallel parking may be possible on Centennial to allow for additional parking in the neighborhood.
So how much visitor parking is there?
On the south site, there are 20 stalls proposed. The application, the zone is written so that the applicant will meet the District of Squamish zoning bylaw requirements. But at time of development permit, there might be a more detailed review needed of the parking.
Well, it meets our parking bylaw if we allow for no driveway, except that we know from experience that is creating conflicts in our neighborhood, and we're responsible for building livable communities. And so I think this is very dense, but I don't think it's livable and convenient for the people who live there.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, this is part question, part comment perhaps, but I'll try to stick with the question part. Because I also had questions around the parking, and according to one of the pages, one of the schedules, 45% of the parking on site 2 is tandem parking, which I understand is allowed by the bylaw, but I have to say I'm not a real fan of. It almost guarantees that at least one of those spots won't be used as parking. And so my concern out of all of that is that we put this in here, people don't use their garages like they typically don't. I don't see how you can have parking on Centennial Way with the truck traffic. Or Loggers Lane, I think you'd want to be quite strict about that. And that means a lot of them are going to end up in the Brennan Park parking lot, and I think I'd rather avoid that. So I'm wondering about the possibility in Site 2. I recognize the internal roads are strata roads, but having a covenant on them that could be enforced by the district, if there be no parking or encroachment on them. Because we've had this problem, as Councillor Elliott alluded to, we've gone through this before with other developments. You comply with bylaws and you end up with something that turns into a bit of a parking mishmash. And I think I'd like to try to start avoiding that. So if we had the ability to control encroachment on those roads, force people to use their garages, not allow parking on Centennial Way, and force parking in Brennan Park, maybe people would start using the garages. But we'd also have to be able to enforce no parking on that internal strata road. And that is, after all, a fire lane. And that's the problem in other strata corps I know, where it's pickup trucks and so forth are sticking out and you couldn't get a fire truck past. So I think we might want to give some thought to that. Is there any thought to the district taking, I'll have the question for it now, is there any thought to the district taking control of, in some form of that internal strata road? Not the maintenance obligations and so forth, but the enforcement of keeping it clear.
That could certainly be done through a covenant. At this point, the proposal meets our parking requirements, which are applied across the district. So I think from a planning perspective, it would be probably more favorable to figure out a way how to make sure that people are using their garages for parking rather than providing more parking. Because as we know, the more parking we provide, the more parking people will use. It's a tricky problem.
Just to follow, I mean, the difficulty I have with that is I can't recall, maybe there is one, but I can't recall another development with such a high percentage of tandem parking. 45% according to that schedule. And so that's my concern is it almost, as I say, it almost guarantees at least one of those spots won't be used for parking. And so then where are the cars?
Councillor Chappelle and Councillor Wood.
Thanks. I'm wondering, you brought up a great point, Jonas, about the about having storage in the garage. Is there a way that they can have off-site storage for things like kayaks and paddleboards? Is there some area, or maybe even lessening by one lot, so that there's a way to have storage as well? Making sure that inside the rental units that there's appropriate garbage and recycling areas. I would agree with my colleagues on difficulty with parking, but that is absolutely our policy. And if we want to change our policy, we have to change our policy, not complain about people actually meeting our policy requirements. So one way I think that we can mitigate that is actually having off-site storage for outdoor equipment that, and my concern is mostly boats because they take up the most space. Skis can be still stored in garages, but boat storage somewhere on site, bike storage will probably not get used. But maybe making the garages a bit longer, that making sure that the proponent knows that that will be one of the utilizations of the townhouses and the duplexes, is that they are required in the design to have adequate storage for outdoor gear.
And just to clarify, I think a lot of things Councillor Chappelle just talked about would be dealt with in a DP situation. However, this is a rezoning, it's complete discretion of council, and policies guide things, but council can, during the rezoning process, make decisions. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Absolutely, yes.
Councillor Elliott.
I'm wondering if, through the CAC discussion, if there was any thought given to the fact that we're displacing a campground and an RV park, which we don't have another one in the city limits, and is an important part of our brand, is to allow people to come here and visit. And, you know, we just made the national news about too many people camping in their vans around the district. And we're about to, with this rezoning, if it goes forward, just exacerbate the problem. And so I'm wondering if there was any thought given to finding another place to put camping or upgrading the campground that we own down the street. And also how many long-term residents of that campground will need to find a new home.
Through your Mayor Heinzman, the existing CD73 zone does have provisions for longer stay, and so there are some people that do stay there for longer than a typical holiday. But it was considered, and that was the number 17 on the list on the screen is enabling the campground that has been developed in close proximity to this one to have that water service.
It's not an RV park. It's a very rustic campground, low cost, low amenity campground. I'm not sure that I see that that's a apples to apples comparison.
Councillor Rees.
Thanks. I also had some questions about the bus service, because if this is going to be a neighborhood hub, I'm wondering why we would just have this one additional bus stop, and why it would just be a pole on a bench and not a proper shelter and so forth. And so, I'm sort of wondering if there's a possibility on, well, I won't pick a street, I won't prejudge it, but having pullouts, because I agree with Councillor Elliott's point. I mean, these are basically 2-lane roads around there, and the bus stops, so does the traffic. And so there's going to be more traffic, obviously, than there is today there. In addition to this development, there might be others, but also, we're also talking about stepping up Brennan Park over the next few years, and so if anything is going to significantly increase. And so I'm wondering if it's been explored with BC Transit to have, to have proper bus stops, pullouts, probably one in each direction, so you're talking about either side of the road, with proper shelters there. And I'm thinking about the type of shelters that we built on Government Road and in the Highlands at the bottom of Perth and Thunderbird. Not just the little tin ones, but something that really indicates that transit's a big part of this development. It's part question, part comment, all of that.
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, do you mean on each side of where it was proposed on Loggers or on Centennial?
Well, it doesn't really matter to me, actually. I guess it's just whatever works. But keeping in mind that it would have to service the townhouse development that's under construction right now, whatever tenants are in the forestry building, which at the moment is a school, and I know that's not permanent probably. This development, but also Brennan Park, and all the traffic that we are trying to encourage to go to Brennan Park not by car. So to me, it's quite a significant demand, a potential demand. So I think it's more than just a post and a bench.
Any more questions, Councillor Elliott?
I'm trying to find this, but can you speak to the industrial uses that are allowed in this zone? I couldn't find it in my notes.
Through your Mayor Heinzman, that will be permitted if the zoning is approved. I'll just actually get the actual zone out to read them. In terms of industrial uses, there is light industrial is the one industrial use.
Oh, I just found it. Why are we putting business and professional office major here? Generally, that's more of a downtown focused use.
On site one.
It's on site 1 and then south side on site 3.
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, it was felt that a mix of different office types would be appropriate here because of its neighborhood node designation.
Did I see him?
It's more of a comment.
Yeah, are there any more clarification questions? Don't see it at this point.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Through the chair, I am appreciative of the neighborhood nodes of commercial. This is actually rezoning a piece of land that is employment land. And so I wouldn't even think to approve this without having neighborhood nodes of commercial in this. I really like the mix. It's more like a mud zone. And I think that everywhere I've traveled has now got mixed commercial use with housing, and people love the walkability, people love the availability of actually having different sorts of ways to work. And our light industrial nowadays is bakeries, and I look at our light industrial and how it's being used, and it's quite innovative. We have a lot of artisan zones, thank you, artisan zones, and people that are servicing our economy moving into these areas. So the parking thing does concern me as well, but I think that that's something that can be adjusted, and people that move into those houses know what they're getting. I think that it's a responsibility really to make people aware of parking situations. They will have 2 cars. So ensuring that the architecture includes 2-car parking and an area maybe for truck parking as well, because people will also have trucks who move up into this area. So there needs to be, I agree with Councillor Elliott on the point of visitor parking needs to be addressed in there. And otherwise, I think this is I'd love to hear the public comments on this. Having it go to first and second reading is something that I'm fine with. The amenities seem really in line with our policy as well, and having that corner cleaned up would be a benefit. I like the provision of water services to the campground, although I can't imagine how to get through a dike with a water service. That's unusual, and I'm hoping that that value, if it doesn't go into the water service, can go into another area, like maybe active transportation. One more comment is the accessibility. This site is unrivaled anywhere in the community, having the corridor trail go by. And I can tell you that if we didn't rezone the industrial land right next door, I was trying to keep employment area in that area, but it's completely gone residential. And we did rezone. I didn't approve of the rezoning of the Seven Peaks because it was taking away employment land. And I thought that that could have used a neighborhood commercial node, being so close to Brendan Park, and it just went 100% townhouses. So now with this, it seems like a really nice mix of density, childcare, and light industrial use.
I would suggest that I think there's been a lot of really interesting comments about parking in particular, about buses. I think there's enough questions, pardon me, that I recommend the council just do first reading, have staff go back and consider some of the comments and questions that have been asked, and maybe work with the proponent and come back with second reading that might have more robust thought about some of those things, or more concrete answers about how we mitigate those situations. I just think there's been enough question that if council is looking to at least move this forward, I suggest first reading. I think there's enough questions that deserve some second thought and some extra diligence by staff and the proponent. Councillors?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to move first reading just so we could put our comments to a motion on the floor.
Okay, there's moved by Councillor Ray, second by Councillor Chappelle.
I'll speak to it. Thanks. So I made the comment about parking, and I won't repeat that, and I made the comment about the bus connections, and I won't repeat that. I do appreciate the mix. I think that's a positive. The mix of light industrial, commercial, and different forms of residential. The other thing I didn't mention in my other comments was just the reorganization of that intersection, because I went by it this morning, and depending on how you count and where you count from, it's either a 5 or a 6-way intersection. So it's going to, from a layman's viewpoint, require a reorganization of that end of the Brennan Park parking lot, and the access is there. And so I'd want to be sure that there is some sharing of the burden of that, at least, because that will take a little bit of effort to do that. But I would like to put first reading on the floor and allow it to go to second reading, allow staff and the proponent to consider these comments. I think that is the appropriate way to go forward. Generally, in favor at this point of the mix and the proposed mix and so forth. So I will support this reading.
I will reluctantly support first reading, but I have a lot of concerns with this. I'm actually surprised it didn't come back to committee before coming to us for first reading. I think if this land was already zoned, we could put the parking requirements in according to our policy. But this is a rezoning, and we all know that lack of driveways and tandem parking don't work. And so I think we've got to be really, really cautious about how much we allow in this property. I think that the employment should wrap around partially on along that right of way with the Rod and Gun Club next to it, because I think there could be more employment uses on this land. I still am concerned about the lack of compensation for giving up a campground. I think that's really unfortunate. Definitely a stronger covenant for the noise. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about what's in front of me, but I'll see what comes back at second reading.
Councillor Chappelle, would you like to say anything? Generally agree. I'm okay to move it forward to first reading. I share some of the concerns my colleagues have mentioned. I will say that it could be that the overall density needs to be jigged a little to make sure we get a better project. But I'll leave that in your hands to figure out how you respond to the comments that have been made. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next in the agenda is 4B1. Sorry, district, is that where we are?
Yes.
District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2020-2011 amendment bylaws OCP implementation priorities. 2620 of 2018. There's a recommended motion that we give it first and second.
Good evening again. My name is Matt Gunn, Community Planner here at the District of Squamish. I'm here to introduce bylaws 2620, 2624, 2625, and 2626 for first and second reading. Our purpose today is to introduce priority zoning amendments that reflect OCP policies and committee of the whole discussion from April 17th, May 15th, and July 3rd. There are 3 proposed zoning amendments and 1 accompanying OCP bylaw. I will discuss the bylaws in order shown on the screen, which aligns with attachment 3 of the report to council. The bylaws are being introduced for first and second reading and to schedule a public hearing for any of the bylaws which council would like to move forward. The first bylaw, bylaw 2620, is the most comprehensive and includes a range of topics which I'll address in the depicted order here. The amendment enables several missing middle housing forms in the RS2 zone. Triplexes would be permitted on corner lots with reduced exterior side setbacks. Cottage clusters would be permitted outside the floodplain. A number of regulations are included pertaining to the siting size and dimension of these buildings or these developments. The bylaw also amends the maximum floor area ratio to incentivize missing middle housing forms. The maximum floor area ratio for dwellings without suites or accessory dwelling units is proposed as 0.45. The maximum floor area ratio of 0.5 is available to single unit dwellings with suites or accessory dwelling units, 2-unit dwellings, triplexes, and cottage clusters. This is a departure from the current situation where that division in max floor area ratio is based on the size of the lot. The bylaw establishes maximum habitable area for accessory dwelling units above garages to prevent transferring garage space to living space through the use of carports, which is something that occasionally is proposed. The bylaw also mandates vehicle access to garages built below accessory dwelling units, something that is missing in the current bylaw and which does get proposed by development applications or in development applications. An indoor amenity space requirement is proposed for apartment developments over 20 units. The requirement is 2 meters squared per dwelling unit. Open space requirements are expanded to encompass the university zones and the C1 local commercial property zone. over 0.5 hectares. This is a departure from previous discussions with council in which staff suggested requirements based on use rather than zoning. The proposed option was chosen in the end to prevent mandating open space requirements in areas where they could be difficult or impossible, such as in the downtown area. A number of changes are proposed for the zoning in the university sub-area. Student and faculty housing definitions are amended to exclude single unit dwellings. The UC1 and UH1 zones are amended to mandate 30,000 square feet of university campus commercial development occurs in the University Village Center along Helfand Way, which is identified in that red box on the screen in the image. University campus commercial is added as a permitted use in the University Village Center, UH1, which is correcting an existing area. Although it was supported in the sub-area plan and intended to be supported in the zoning, it was not in the way the zone was written. Setbacks are established for all uses in the UH1 zone. Several were missing setbacks. The UH1 map schedule is updated to correct an error in mapping regarding identification of an Area 2 block within a different zone, a UC1 zone. That's mainly a housekeeping change. A few errors are just corrected in that. One note in this university sub-area set of amendments is that staff have not recommended allocating units across the university sub-area. We had proposed allocating housing units to specific parcels rather than across the UH1 zone to resolve the existing competitive scenario and to provide more opportunity for district involvement in decision making. Staff engaged with development stakeholders and were informed that district involvement in the existing zoning allocation at this time could have a highly disruptive impact on current decision making regarding land development. And without support from landowners, it is challenging to determine an appropriate allocation, and in particular how to respect existing private agreements. It may be that allocating housing could be more straightforward in the near term, provided key development decisions are made by owners. So that aspect of this bylaw has been abandoned for the time being. In regards to active transportation, requirements for bike commuter trip and facilities is proposed for industrial and commercial uses. Those requirements would mean that a building the size of Municipal Hall would be required to provide one shower, one wash basin, and one toilet for bike commuting usage. Bicycle parking requirements are updated to include minimum dimensions for Class A spaces. 5% are also proposed to have additional length to accommodate cargo bikes, and 30% are proposed to have access to electrical charging outlets for electric bikes. An ecological reserve zone is proposed and applied to public land designated conservation and ecological reserve in the official community plan, and those lands are depicted in the image on screen. A neighborhood park and school zone is proposed and applied to land in the Quest area. This land is identified for school or park use in the university sub-area plan. The zoning amendment is intended to ensure that this land is preserved for these uses into the future. The area of the university land that is proposed for that P5 zone reflects the area identified in covenants which are currently registered on title of the applicable properties. The covenant mandates dedication of parkland in these areas before rezoning, and so it does not represent a loss of development rights on these properties. This is a different area from the area that's identified in the sub-area plan, and also different from the area that was discussed with council on a previous meeting from staff. A separate bylaw 2624, which is an OCP amendment, is proposed to update the sub-area plan and bring this proposed zoning in alignment with the sub-area plan. A groundwater protection zone is proposed and applied to the majority of the area identified as proposed groundwater protection zone in the District of Squamish Powerhouse Springs Well Protection Plan. The bylaw includes a minor amendment to avoid penalizing energy efficiency construction through thicker walls. The portion of exterior wall thickness beyond 150 millimeters would be excluded from the gross floor area calculation. A number of supportive housing uses are added to uses permitted in all zones. These include assisted living facility, community care facility, transitional housing, and emergency shelter. Finally, 2 housekeeping items have been included. The current zoning bylaw definition of habitable space is replaced with the floodplain management bylaw definition for habitable area to improve clarity of interpretation. The term accessory residential dwelling has been replaced or would be replaced with the term caretaker dwelling to distinguish the use from the accessory dwelling unit. It's simply a housekeeping change for clarity. The next bylaw, number 2624, is intended to align the Sea to Sky University Sudbury plan with the proposed neighborhood park and school P5 zone that I discussed a moment ago. Figure 4, the land use plan in that Sudbury plan, is replaced to reflect the proposed P5 zoning and the covenant register and title for the campus lands and parcel A to the north. The current image on the left, or the figure on the left, is the current plan in the Sudbury plan, and it would be replaced with the one on the right, identifying that school/park zone. The next bylaw, Bylaw 2625, is intended to restrict single-unit dwellings and two-unit dwellings within the Sea to Sky University Sudbury plan area to areas where these housing forms have already been built or where subdivision applications have been received for these housing forms. Those are identified on the screen. This would result in further development of the UH1 lands being restricted to multifamily development. This amendment reflects Sudbury plan intention to ensure the majority of development on the university area is multifamily. I would point out that some landowners who would be affected by this regulatory change have expressed that single unit dwellings provide a higher development value than multifamily, and I anticipate that they would oppose this proposed amendment. The final bylaw, number 2626, is intended to include two-unit dwellings as a permitted use in the RS1 and RS1A zone. Now, in a previous committee meeting, staff were uncertain regarding the level of council interest in this expansion of duplex permissibility in the RS1 zone, and therefore we've provided a separate bylaw today for consideration. The bylaw would add duplex as a permitted use to the existing RS1 zone. The bylaw also includes an amendment to the maximum floor area ratio in the RS1 and RS1A to incentivize missing middle housing forms rather than larger lots, as is currently the case. The max FAR for dwelling units without suites or ADUs is proposed as 0.45, and the max floor area ratio of 0.5 would be available to dwellings with suites or accessory dwelling units, two-unit dwellings. Just suites, dwellings with suites or accessory dwelling units. These bylaws are an implementation of policy from the new OCP, and as such, they lean heavily on the engagement completed during the OCP process. Additional engagement to date has included a dedicated project information page on the district's website and a community engagement session hosted June 7th. Engagement also includes individual communication with stakeholders associated with the University Sudbury. The staff recommendation includes first and second reading of the 4 bylaws discussed today, as well as scheduling a public hearing for September 18th.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions? Councilor Elliott.
So, Matt, I'm just going to get you to explain the change around not allocating housing units in the Quest University lands. And so, I know we've got another bylaw that says we'll restrict it to multifamily development from now on. Where do we get to influence this other piece? Will it be through the rezoning process, or I know we've taken a step back, but I'm just wondering where we get to step back in.
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Heinzman, the point at which we would step back in is not determined at this point. We would need to identify that as a priority and move forward on it. I do think it's a worthwhile endeavor, but I think it could be very challenging to do at this point for 2 reasons. One, I think it could cause a lot of disruption in existing decision making that's going on at the university, but 2, I feel like I would have to make some fairly arbitrary decisions that could be inflammatory at this time. If there's clear ownership of land with intent to develop, and through the process of that clear ownership and development intentions of the university, if that process occurs and comes to a conclusion, which my understanding is underway and is moving forward, if that occurs, once a couple of these, there's some fairly large decisions to make by the owners. Once those have completed, it would then be, I think, quite simple to step in and allocate the units without creating disruption or significant antagonism. And then I think we would have the ability to look at individual parcels that currently aren't in a situation to upzone based on these private agreements, and move forward with decisions at that point. But I think we want to wait until some existing plans come to fruition at the university. Does that clarify?
Yeah, that helps a bit. And I'm just wondering, I know we got 2 of the bylaws printed today, and I'm just wondering how they've changed from what is in my electronic version.
Yeah, that's a good question. There were some fairly minor changes to, a lot of it was related, there's probably about 4 changes, small things related to when I produced the bylaws, some editing issues, corrections to the layout. They aren't substantive for the most part. They're following the intent of what we had discussed and correcting issues in the original drafting of the bylaws.
Thank you.
Any further questions? We need to consider these individually, so if someone would like to put first and second reading for bylaw number 2620.
Move that.
Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Grace. I'll call the question. All those in favour? Opposed, if any, motion carries. Next up is bylaw number 2624, West Neighbourhood Park. First and second reading, moved by Councillor Spa, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favour? Opposed, motion carries. Next up is bylaw number 2625, Crest Single and 2-unit dwellings. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Race. Call the question. All those in favour? Opposed, motion carries. And then we have 2626, RS1, 2-unit dwellings, given first and second reading. So moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. And part of that motion is that the public hearing be scheduled for all of the above. Should I do it separately, Robin?
You can do it as one.
Do it as one? For September 8th. We can do the public hearing separately if someone else separate them up. Okay, so just on first and second reading, I'll call the question on 2626. All those in favour? Opposed? Councillor Elliott opposes. Motion carries. And that a public hearing be scheduled for Tuesday, September 18th at 6 p.m. in council chambers on bylaws 2625, 2626, 2620, 2624, and whatever I've missed. Move public hearing, seconded by Councillor Race, Chappelle Race. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. And we are on to the next. Thank you very much. Next up is District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw 2020-2011 Amendment Bylaw CD 91 38201 3rd Avenue, number 2563 2017. Good job, council. It's been a long day for the 4 of us.
We lost reception.
Keep going.
Our computer.
Still got work to do.
It's got nothing to do with plugins.
No?
Long day for the projector.
The projector's gone.
The machines can't take it anymore.
Rage against the machine.
That's something we put this,
Oh, it's wrong.
stick it, yeah.
There you go.
How's council doing?
If you,
7th stretch, sure you have to.
No bio break necessities. We're all good.
We'll find out.
No? Nobody?
Sharon, can you turn it on? Room off and then on? I know it's on, but we might need to reestablish our connection.
You need to pull the.
Yeah.
how about while you figure that out, if it's all right with council, we'll go to for D1. After the public hearing earlier this evening, council can consider third reading and adoption in one motion, Robin, or
Okay, we third introductions.
in one motion? So moved by Councillor Race.
Which one are you doing?
You're doing
Oh, yes.
third reading and adoption from the public hearing earlier tonight. Second by Councillor Elliott. Anyone want to speak to this? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, the motion carries. Just on this, these were, I think, just basic, we knew we'd have to do this sort of tidy up, and I think staff are getting back to us very quickly. How are we doing? Okay,
Our computer's working, but
But this projection is not.
we just have two more items.
Where's the white?
Why don't we take a 3-minute recess? We're going to just alter the agenda a little bit here and move forward. Item 4C1 and 2. Two goes over 2 pages. So. Firstly, as I said earlier, I just want to acknowledge members of the Squamish Nation who are here. I know there's a number of elders here, and there's a number of chiefs here, and a number of council members. And as always, we thank you for welcoming us on your traditional territory and welcoming you to our chambers. Pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jonas Vilanishkas, Director of Community Planning. And with me today is David Ralston, Manager of Municipal Infrastructure. Thank you. So today we're bringing forward a public hearing report, which happened a little while ago on the Chikai fan development, as well as consideration of third reading. And that is the purpose, to receive the report and to consider the OCP and the zoning bylaw amendment and its conditions for third reading, and the conditions would be have to be met prior to adoption. So the staff report that is on the agenda has a summary of the public hearing that occurred on June 26th. The minutes have also already been circulated to council. And it is a legislative requirement that when not all the councillors are at the public hearing, that a public hearing report, oral or in writing, be prepared. And so we're doing it in writing. I'm not going to go over the content of the public hearing, more focus on the conditions and the proposed changes. So since the public hearing, given the comments received, the applicant has proposed one change, which is the timing of some of the amenities, and the proposal is to bring the amenities forward sooner that relate to affordable housing. So previously it was proposed that affordable housing be built by the time the market housing reaches 301st unit. And that has been revised to bring it sooner to 201st unit. And a similar situation is proposed with market rental housing. So there's 85 affordable housing and 85 market rental housing units. The market rental housing units are proposed now at 301st market for sale units. So previously that was at 501st. So both of those components would be coming early on in the development process. And thirdly, there's an additional concern was raised at the public hearing related to the noise covenant in proximity to the airport, and so we're proposing it as an inclusion as a condition in the land development agreement that a noise cover be registered on the property. In terms of conditions, we'll focus on conditions that have to be achieved prior to adoption, conditions that will be placed in the land development agreement that will live on after the adoption, and then as well as conditions that are related to just the mitigation, all of which have to happen prior to adoption. So in terms of conditions that need to be fulfilled before the bylaws are adopted, it's the dedication of the Brackendale Farmers Institute Park, the cash contribution of 1.5 million as a community amenity contribution. Water and sewer modeling has to be done, as well as an updated traffic impact assessment. And just to make sure that those last two, if there's anything that comes up that we didn't anticipate, we can capture those projects into the land development agreement. At adoption, the council will also have an opportunity to review the land development agreement. And in the land development agreement, we will be securing park dedications and trail improvements. So that's not the dedication of the Institute Park. It's just there's linear parks associated with the Ray Peters Trail. The trail improvements, the commercial space and the daycare, affordable and market rental housing, enhanced transit center, crossroad upgrades, as well as certain standards within the strata roads, such as laneways in certain areas, as well as sidewalks. The fire protection measures, integrated stormwater management plan, green development standards, local area service tax petition and bylaw commitment, and then any necessary road closures and land acquisitions would have to be done subsequent to adoption. Environmental conditions that were outlined in the numerous reports that have been submitted over the years with this application, as well as the noise covenant. And I'll hand it over to David to go through the mitigation conditions, unless you want to.
You can just keep running.
Okay, I'll keep running then. Any questions, I will defer to David. So in terms of these are...
You mean the manager of municipal taxation?
Thank you. These have been summarized. If you look at the report, the conditions take about 3 pages. So there's a lot more detail in the report than there is here. But essentially, prior to adoption, conditions that relate to debris flow mitigation system are to finalize the debris flow modeling summary report that's dated 2015, prepare debris flow modeling and submit for public use. So we would be incorporating those results into our plans, such as an official community plan. Secure access to debris flow model for public use at cost and for private use at market rate. So that if the district needed access to those models to run additional scenarios, we would have at cost access, and then any private parties, such as other developers, would have to would be entitled to access at market rate. Essentially, we don't want a monopoly over the model. Prepare a detailed design for all aspects of the mitigation system. Secure any necessary tenure and permitting approvals, of which in that process the district will likely have to also play a role. So some of the conditions talk about going through the permitting process collaboratively, because we're going to be, at the end of the day, taking on the mitigation system. Prepare the debris mitigation system operation and post-event restoration manuals. Provide capital and operational cost estimates based on detailed design. Finalize the operation and maintenance funding model, and that will relate to the options that have been outlined at the public hearing. Establish no net loss of trails related to the installation of mitigation. Complete a final risk assessment showing risk levels to be within the as low as reasonably practicable. Certify development as safe for intended use, which is a pretty standard requirement. Register a Section 219 covenant prescribing mitigation requirements prior to subdivision of lands. And all of this is going to be overseen by an independent review panel throughout the design process. And so here are the 3 recommendations. I didn't list in the slide, but essentially the the last recommendation and that prior to adoption, items listed in the staff report be completed, refer to all of these conditions that were outlined.
Thank you very much. I'll go to council if there are any questions, I think particularly about the conditions of adoption. Really?
So I have two questions. With regard to 11C, this is about the final quantitative risk assessment. And it says risk falls within AWAR zone, confirm that costs are grossly disproportionate to benefit gain for additional mitigation measures. So how is that determined? And why is that language in quotes? That comes from somewhere?
Through the mayor, so that is part of the definition of this ALARP, or as low as reasonably practicable. It's the point, first of all, it pertains to risk to loss of life and ensuring that the risk to loss of life is below defined criteria. But then also that additional funding that would be put into mitigation, basically that you're reaching a point of diminishing returns. And so that is part of the definition of the ALARP.
My other question is, how is the review panel being chosen?
Through the mayor, we have met with the proponents recently and we are discussing that. Ultimately, there are several aspects of the mitigation that need to be reviewed. That includes hazard assessment and debris flow modeling, risk assessment, and the actual design of the mitigation structure. So the review of that falls both onto the district and the province. So the district and the province will be selecting this panel together with input from our experts, input from the developer, input from the province.
Okay, and my final question, if that's all right. So condition J, finalize the operations and maintenance funding model. This particular one, I think, should reference council. So at the public hearing, we presented 3 different models, and which may or may not include some provincial funding, depending on what happens over the next little while. But I think prior to adoption, that funding model needs to come back to council. And I think that's missing from these conditions, because ultimately, I think that should be a discussion and possibly some interaction before it comes before us to adopt. I'm concerned that we don't have space for that written in.
Thank you, that's a really good point. That's absolutely the intent, is that that particular piece is certainly going to come back to council before adoption. But we could amend this condition to include council's discretion in it.
I'd certainly be happy to hear from my fellow councillors, but for me, that adding some language around that would just help clarify and make sure that the next council knows that they'll be good.
Yes.
And I think, for me, I read the intent in there, but I think it's beneficial to add the language just to make sure that's really clear. Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Anyone else have any questions on the recommended conditions of adoption? I don't see any more. I am going to move the OCP amendment. We could second it. Seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Actually, maybe what we'll do is we'll just vote on this one and then we can talk about the next one. That's all right? I'll just call a question on the OCP amendment. Unless someone has something burning to speak to about the OCP amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have the rezoning application, and the motion would include the conditions as outlined, with just the inclusion of that one clarifying addition of adding council into that one motion.
If I could suggest an amendment.
Please do.
So it would read, finalize the operations and maintenance funding model to be approved by council for all mitigation structures, etc.
Okay, I'm happy to move this as well. Is there a seconder? Councillor Chappelle seconds. I think we'll go around the table because I suspect everyone will have a say and their views on this. Who would like to start?
You can start. Yeah, I'm glad to see this come to third reading. I really think this is an important piece in just mostly working with the First Nations for developing some economic development that is equitable and fair for them, working with people in our community to actually develop something that is going to provide economic development to the First Nations. So we talked about reconciliation across much of our policy, and over 4 years we've talked about reconciliation, but this project really is something that brings forward a way for First Nations to move economic development forward in our community and bring housing to membership. And so I love the urban planning design. I like the connectivity of the trails, and I look forward to having some mitigation strategy for our community as well, so the rest of our community can feel safe in their houses.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. And I think this issue has been around for quite a while, but I've been dealing with it as a councillor since my first term, which is now almost 10 years ago. And at that time, when the nation and a development partner brought forward discussion about this, we were talking about approximately 700 single-family homes. That has evolved significantly since then to, I think, approximately 1,100 or 1,200 mixed-use units, primarily at the suggestion of our staff and council comments through the process, where we've been looking for varied forms of housing, different income levels and costs of housing, to really meet some of the housing needs in our community. This land, apart from the debris hazard, is eminently suited for development, flat, easy to service, and is adjacent to existing servicing, so it doesn't involve some of the costs of infrastructure that some developments might. So I think it has been a well-received plan for housing, and we certainly haven't had, to my recollection, over the time, any negative comments about the form of housing or the development. It comes with the added bonus of facilitating the dedication of the Brackendale Farmers Institute Park area as a public park. That's also been a long-time goal of members of this community, and it will now be realized. The difficult and the problematic part of this development, as we proceeded through consideration of it over the last 10 years, has been the debris hazard. When this initially came to council in my first term, we were talking about some kind of a small berm around the development area, which is more or less like the berm that's around the two schools that are in the area. After the Meager Creek slide and as science developed and modeling developed, that risk was viewed as actually more than what the berm could handle. And in fact, the risk was considered not just to threaten the potential development in this area, but substantially all of Brackendale and the existing development in Brackendale. And so that has given us a lot of consideration, or taken a lot of consideration and given us a lot of thought. And how do we deal with this? How do we review the information? How do we fund this over the past years? We also considered a variety of different options for mitigation. We considered a berm on one side of the river only, considered a berm down below the highway. There was even consideration of draining Garibaldi Lake, for heaven's sakes. and I have to laugh, I'm sorry. But ultimately we ended up with the berm or barrier above the highway, which will have the advantage of protecting the whole of the Brackendale area, IR 11 on the other side of the Chuckamus River, and the development area. The funding has also evolved, and the funding options as this was progressed. Initially, it was thought that it would just be protecting the development. Now, that it's going to be protecting a substantial part of our existing community, developed community. And that funding will now be shared. Not the initial construction, the ongoing maintenance costs will now be shared between the greater municipality as well as the development. But it does mark, I think, a milestone in development in this community, cooperation between different stakeholders, different partners, and I am happy to support this application.
Charlie?
Thank you. Happy to support third reading, and certainly this file has challenged me in a number of ways, and recognizing the risk to a vast piece of our community and trying to figure out what to do with it, against also understanding the long-term implications in terms of funding it and the practicalities. And of course, lives matter, and you don't want to be weighing those against taxes and funding models, but it is my job to do that. And so I found that challenging, and also the idea of potentially putting more people in harm's way and trusting a structure that hasn't been built yet. And so, you know, it will be up to the next council to make sure that we continue to be cautious and make sure we're approving something so that people living on the Chikai Fen and the other parts of the community can truly sleep at night once this barrier is built. That would give peace of mind to everybody. But as Councillor Ray said, forms of housing that are there, I think will really resonate with the community. Seeing the affordable housing and the rental housing moved up, I think were really important, and I'm glad to see that happen. I think the park will become a magnificent gathering place for our community over the long term. There's just a lot of benefits to this project going forward. And I'll encourage future council, though, to keep dotting the I's and crossing the T's and make sure we get it right so that it's sustainable for everybody, for the people living in that community and also for the other residents of Squamish.
Thank you, everyone. I agree generally with everything my cohort and my colleagues have said. For me, this project, I try to compartmentalize it a little bit in terms of do some critical thinking about the planning. I think it's evolved a long way, as Councillor Grace indicated, from a predominantly single-family home to a much more comprehensive mixed housing development, mixed-use development that I think really will add value to the whole Brackendale area. So from a planning point of view, I think there's some really interesting aspects to it. The trail integration, the laneway integration, there's a couple really cool things about this project that I think will deliver a really interesting neighborhood and one that I think people will value in the future. I certainly believe that there's are still habitat and wildlife corridor issues in the Chikai Fan that we have to be really mindful of as we move forward. I know this is something that the nation holds dear as well, so I believe that they'll think about these lands with that sensitivity in mind in the future. But at the same time, there really are two fundamental underlying pieces to this application that really swayed my mind. One has already been articulated about safety. And not just safety of existing community, but safety of the Squamish and CHM, no, Waywacom reserves. That's been very, very clear in all the correspondence and all the presentations that Squamish Nation members have put forward to us through public hearings and through other means, that is fundamental to protect their citizens, and we share that resolve. So this actually is really, the mitigation thing really is a tipping point. The other piece, and Councillor Chappelle alluded to it, is really about reconciliation and about making sure that our Squamish Nation collaborators and partners feel empowered and have opportunities that were taken from them. And so this is about that as well. Fundamentally, it's about that. I really thank the proponent for bringing forward the non-market and market rental housing further closer in this, as you know, and we've had these conversations many times, Chris and I, about, we all share in this housing crisis issue. Members have housing issues of both the nation and people who live in the district of Squamish. And this fundamental piece of providing secure rental is really important. So I think I'm glad to hear that they heard that from the public hearing, they heard that from the comments from council, and that those units are brought up earlier in the process. And I hope maybe even earlier. But I appreciate the gesture. I think it's really valuable. I can't go on without speaking to the park too. This has been a goal and a vision, and certainly as far back as the 1950s was something that the Brackendale Farmers Institute had envisioned way back then. So this sort of brings full circle that opportunity and that vision that was catalyzed, 60, 70 years ago. So there's a lot of things that I think I'm really appreciative. We've had to go through this very challenging financial analysis of this. I think there's still pieces that the district needs to really make sure we're paying close attention to. Fundamentally, we have to be able to finance this, we have to be able to afford it, and we need the province to make sure that they are being participants in that. And I know that the nation has brought that message to the province as well, because fundamentally they have a huge amount at risk if this is not built, and that the risk, if it is built, is minuscule compared to the risk that exists if it's not built. So, and I want to thank everyone for their patience. This has been a hard process. This has been, as Councillor Grace alluded to, 10, 15 years in the making. I think I saw the first iteration of this in my first term, which was over 10 years ago, Councillor Grace. So, and I know, I look at Dale, I know it was well before that it started as well. So I know this has been a long time coming. I know this has been a long goal of the nation's, and it sounds like we're going to get one step closer to it tonight. I am going to ask, with Council's permission, that we allow members of the nation to speak briefly after we make this decision, just to honor them with an opportunity to speak in our chamber. Councillor.
Thanks. I just want to point out, we've spoken quite a bit to the funding model, and we talk about collaboration with the province, but we can't forget that this is a massive structure that should also be on the template of the federal government for reconciliation as well. This is a housing project that will require, with the mitigation and the funding and the long-term strategy, that it will take the district, the nation, and Cheek-Eye to look for funding strategies. And if we can lessen the burden of the cost of the debris flow barrier through grants, not just from the province, but from the feds, and working together, that it may ease the burden of the financing, especially long-term financing as well, of any mitigation strategy.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? If any, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. I see Chris, and I'm wondering if maybe Dale or anyone. I saw Chief Bill here. Maybe if a few people would like to say a few words, please come up to the podium. We welcome you, and thank you for working with us through this process.
It's a long time coming, and certainly I really want to thank Mayor and Council for their work, their time and dedication. I've always, it's been 15 years. It has been 15 years. And when my mom always said in the beginning, and I've always remembered her saying at that community hearing, she's 87 years old. She's been in council, she's been involved in district politics, Squamish Nation, and provincial and federal. And she said, one thing she said, it's not about money, it's about saving lives. And leaving things, anything unchecked or unchallenged, you know, and we're here with our proponents to provide a solution. I just wanted to acknowledge Darren Stadell, Ron Bronstein, and Sean Darling from the province. They came over here today. And there's many others out of that 12, 15 years that we've been seeing. I've seen people come, people go, mayors come, mayors go, council comes. I don't know, Doug and Patty were here in the very beginning. And, you know, I just wanted to share and just give thanks. I really do. I want to give thanks to the staff, the district staff, you know, the work and their hard dedication for it. It's a long time coming. I just wanted to do that and acknowledge our partners, you know, our partner here, you know, and feel really good the work that's being done here today, and looking forward to go up and meet those conditions and get her done. That's yeah, man.
So I just take this time to thank the elders for being present. Over for this celebration. It's a celebration, and I heard from the table, you know, it's hard work, and we do have to do hard work when we're talking about all, but I also want to thank the community. The community is most important. Their voices when we first did the first reading and all, because everybody has an input, right? It's a celebration to us, yes, it's reconciliation, yes, but it's moving forward. If we don't build nothing, nothing's going to be there, right? We understand that, but we had to go through all the other bureaucratic stuff and stuff to make sure that the funding's there. We understand that. I like the thought of all the affordable living and all that. We need it everywhere. And we're going to undertake that ourselves, right? You know, but I just want to thank everybody in the district of Squamish for showing up. And I've been a part of this for about, yeah, it has to be easy 10 years, right? Show my face here and there. And even when I didn't make it into council, I still, yeah, I'm on the chief of council, still have people now, Squamish elected. But, I showed up anyway. Right? Even if I ain't on a file, I show up because it's very important. So when I'm an old man and I got kids that I'm thinking of, I grew up in this area. I tell the our locals that live up here, all the family members and the cousins, right? And I say to them, I say, I came around here since I was 5 years old, 4 years old. This was my playground. You know, and I watched it flood. I watched different things happen, environmental stuff. And you know what? This is a day of celebration that we're building something that's going to be made for protection, right? And I want to thank the council of the day. I want to thank the previous council. I want to thank our previous council. I want to thank my auntie and my uncle and my chief, Bill, and his family for being here. I want to thank our partnership, right? You know, and our previous partner, too. I want to thank him. But I also want to thank the many chiefs we had over the years for helping us get to here. You know, Chief Bill's in the back there. I chummed along with Bill, and he let me come along, and I thought that was an honor to watch and hear what they know. Dick Williams. You know, I don't speak like Dick. I wish I did. He's really straight to the point. But I just want to thank everybody here. I just want to thank everybody. Chris is going to say some nice thank you.
Yoyoka, Mayor and Council, Cinque Mantomiya. My ancestral name is Sitoktin. I am one of 16 elected council members of the Squamish Nation, and today is a very happy, momentous day. As I heard from the statesmen in both of our governments, I let my elders go first here, or one of the younger guys in the room.
Not for long.
Yeah, yes. But we're taught by our elders that are in the room and not in the room and have gone on to the spirit world that our sole responsibility of our community and our nation is the safety and well-being of our children and our elders. It's not just our leadership responsibility, it's our entire community's responsibility. And I really take that principle and apply it to this rezoning, this project, because we are providing the safety and well-being of the entire community by doing something. We all know it's the most studied area in probably northwestern Canada in terms of potential and where we went. So, and I really want to pay testament to the leadership of today, the leadership of the past, to continue on in all of that patience, and that we continue to work together, even though there was rough waters in times, and sometimes it was tougher, and we just kind of continued to paddle together. We would go to the province and together and talk to the province and say, we need to work together. All of us need to work together. We were all put on notice that we must provide safety for our communities, for our elders and our children, all 3 levels of government. And I stay committed to that. This project just provides the economic means to provide that safety. And I'm really happy that it's also providing affordable, attainable housing for our community. Our community and your community is one community. We have a lot of our members that live off reserve. They want to move on reserve, but there's not housing there. As the mayor said, we have a housing crisis. The affordability is going up. This is going to provide an opportunity for hopefully our people to stay in Squamish or move from the city up to Squamish. As Gosla's Councillor Richie Baker said, this is our place where we teach our kids, where we pass on the traditions. So I really again want to thank Mayor and Council for the adoption of 3rd reading and the approval. It is a good day, and on behalf of Squamish Nation Council and our citizens of the Squamish Nation, we thank you for this day. Osiam Tamakwitsi Snatchum.
Chief Bill, I know you've been at this for a long time. Do you want to share any words? Thank you very much. Thank you, Dale and Richie and Chris and everyone for coming out. Hopefully the guys from the province heard our message that we still need the province to be participatory in this whole process. But I thank you for being here. We'll call a 5-minute recess and we'll convene in 5 minutes. We are on next item. The 3rd Avenue Seniors Housing.
Good afternoon, evening, sorry. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jesse Fletcher, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. Tonight I'm introducing the first component of the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society Redevelopment Plan, the rezoning at 38201 3rd Avenue. So a rezoning application has been received for the lands located at 38201 3rd Avenue. The parcel is shown with the red outline on the screen. The parcel is located downtown at the corner of 3rd Avenue and Pemberton Avenue, located immediately adjacent to the Shannon Falls Retirement Residences. The site fronts 3 roads, Evelyn Boulevard, 3rd Avenue, and Pemberton Avenue. Currently, there are 2 buildings on site, the Cedars and the Manor, both multi-unit residential buildings, which provide a total of 70 subsidized rental units for senior citizens. The site is currently owned and run by the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society. The site has a land use contract on site and underlying multiple unit residential RM3 zoning. The application proposes to rezone the site to a comprehensive development zone, CD91. The site is subject to development permit areas 2 and 3. The application is part of a larger proposed redevelopment for seniors housing. The site in yellow on the screen, located at 38275 3rd Avenue, has applied for a development permit to build a 6-story apartment building, which would provide 232 subsidized rental units for seniors. If the proposed rezoning receives 3rd reading, this application for a development permit will be presented to council for consideration. So first, some background. The subject parcel was acquired by the district in 1964 as part of a larger land acquisition from the province. The district acquired 56 acres, more commonly known as Block R, from Pacific Great Eastern Railway for $60,000. A portion of the land was gifted to the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society in 1968 for seniors housing. The Cedars was built in 1972 and offered 20 units of seniors housing. Block R was further subdivided in 1975 and gifted to the society to accommodate the Manors, which offers an additional 50 units of seniors housing. During this subdivision, a land use contract was put on the site, which stipulated that all construction was to be completed by 1977. This land use contract is still in place and prevents the development of anything new on site until it is discharged either by district bylaw or in 2024 when all land use contracts are discharged province-wide. In 2002, the district gifted an additional 3.6 acres to the society. This is the parcel located at 38275 3rd Avenue and included the parcel to the south where Shannon Falls retirement residences are located. This occurred by subdivision and was contingent on a housing agreement that prevented subdivision of the site and required that the site provide non-market seniors housing. There was a subdivision soon after in 2007 and that led to the development of the Shannon Falls Retirement Center, where there was another housing agreement that allowed for the development of special housing units on that site. Polygon and the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society presented the land swap relationship to the Community Development Senate Committee meeting on December 6, 2016. The application was received on September 25th, 2017. During the development files update on October 3rd, 2017, Council requested more information on the history of the sites, including previous ownership and more information on the nature of the agreement. This information was presented to the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 14th, 2017. All right, so the proposed rezoning would allow a mixed-use building with commercial at grade and residential above. The building proposes to reach a maximum of 6 stories with a maximum permitted height of 22 meters. Key zoning statistics are outlined on the slide. The applicant has proposed a floor area ratio of 1.8. The proposed zone would require that 10% of the gross floor area be employment space, which would front 3rd Avenue, Pemberton Avenue, and Eagle Wind Boulevard. Childcare is among the proposed permitted uses in this zone, classified under neighborhood commercial. And the developer has indicated that if it is possible, they will build some of the employment space to provincial standards for a childcare space. This space would include some of the proposed park space. The remaining 16,976 square meters of residential space would create approximately 195 residential units. A 5-meter building setback is proposed on Pemberton and 3rd Avenue, while a 3-meter setback is proposed on Eagle Wind Boulevard and along the rear setback. The proposal includes a small park at approximately 1,100 square meters located on the southwest corner of the site. This is the portion of the site shown in green on the slide above. And the park will be activated by the applicant and secured with a statutory right-of-way for public access in the land development agreement. Following the rezoning, a development permit would be required. The developer has agreed not to proceed with the development of the site until the seniors rental site is built and all current residents have moved. No DP for this site has been submitted. The developer is offering to provide a community amenity contribution that exceeds the amount outlined in the draft CAC policy, reviewed but not approved by council. The developer is proposing $15 per square foot of total square footage, which makes for a community amenity contribution of approximately $3.65 million to be dedicated to the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society to help with their proposed development. The developer is also proposing publicly accessible and activated park space located at grade, totaling approximately 1,100 square meters. This space would be secured by way of statutory right-of-way in the land development agreement. If the developer was to follow the draft community amenity contribution policy, their total contribution would be approximately $3 million and be dedicated to active transportation, park amenities, and either to the Community Amenity Provision Fund or Affordable Housing Reserve. The project was posted to the district's development showcase. 3 requests for a public information meeting were made for this site and 7 for the site at 38275 3rd Avenue, 275 3rd. Most comments associated with the request spoke about both this site and the other site. The developer will be required to hold a public information meeting regarding this project and the partner project prior to public hearing. Public notification procedures will be undertaken should council confirm the public hearing. The project's conformance with official community plan policies are found in your report this evening. A brief summary is provided on the slide and range from increased employment space and opportunity to securing quality usable parkland. Staff recommend that council pass the first and second readings to amendment bylaw 2563, subject to and prior to scheduling the public hearing that a public information meeting be held, and that the land use contract termination bylaw be given first and second reading.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions? Councilor Scott?
Thank you. I'm wondering if we've done any market assessment of, it's basically turning one of the lots into a market housing lot. And I appreciate and understand the trade, but I was wondering what the assessment would be of the lot as a market housing lot. If we had that land to sell, what would that lot be worth? Have we thought about the economics of development of the sites and how much the community amenities should be with a gift of the land like this?
Through you, Mayor, staff have contemplated based on a general cost per square foot estimated of land of what the value would be and put that somewhere between 8 and 10 million.
Excellent, thank you. And can I just ask one more question? When we have deals like this where it's market housing or a trade for a use, you can either go to a private proponent or this is a facility that is going to be built for seniors and we need seniors housing, but both lots are our land. So have we thought of going out to market on this has any other work been done to go out to market to see if there's other proponents that would do mixed use development on the site or district development on the site?
Just wanted to clarify that it's not district land. The land belongs to the senior society, and we have not done any other kind of research into other possibilities.
It was gifted by the district for seniors use. Yeah, so specifically with the covenant on it for senior use. So we're changing it to market. If we're rezoning, we are changing it to market housing, one lot, and we're changing the other one. So then once it's market, changing the zoning to market housing takes the use out of seniors use. So that should have extraordinary benefits, and the benefit, I guess, is getting the site built. But I just wonder how many innovative models besides this one presentation were thought about. Was anything else thought about besides the land swap here?
It may be something that the Seniors Housing Society wants to
Yeah,
answer, whether
absolutely.
they went to a competitive bid on this or how they came to this conclusion. I'll leave it up to them if they'd like to answer it. I just don't think it's a question for their staff
I
to
agree.
answer. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it necessary to say my name or?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, Peter Gordon.
You don't have to say your address, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Just that you're representing the Seniors.
Seniors Housing Society, yes. Thank you. Can I get more clarity on the question?
I'm wondering if the Seniors Housing Society went out to bid and had numerous offers on the site once they went out for competitive bid, where you were looking for more density, or how you came about this particular application of trading this big piece for the proposal.
Correct. We did look at another model, which was to try and find financing from other sources, but it really limited the amount of housing that we could build. And so it was actually Polygon that approached us on the basis that they had done this exact model of housing in Richmond. And they invited us to speak with the Richmond Squamish Housing Society and ask lots of leading questions. We were given time alone with them and so on, so I had a tour. Everything looked really, really good. We then decided that we had to maintain market value for the property in exchange. So we then hired an appraiser to do that. I believe a copy of the appraisal has been circulated. If not, well, I'm sure we could find a way of making it so. But we've been assured through the appraisal that we're receiving market value for the property.
Thank you. That's good.
And the number that was mentioned, it's getting in that neighborhood there. So, yeah.
Market value for the rezoned property?
Yes,
not for the
correct,
existing
that's
zone.
correct. Yeah,
Yes.
that was the assumption. Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Beveridge?
Just so I'm clear, so in the agreement between Polygon and the Seniors Citizens Housing Society, it talks about Polygon is purchasing the land at a fair market value, and Housing Society will use that revenue in addition to existing equity and a grant from BC Housing to fund the new building. But then there's the $3.6 million CAC. Where's that? Is that in addition to what I just read out?
Through you, Mayor, yes, the proposed CAC is in addition to what's in the report.
So it's not going towards the construction of the new?
It will be going towards the Squamish Senior Citizens
It will be going
Home
towards what
Society.
council determines it'll go towards. The proposal is
It's
that
to
it
go
goes towards the seniors.
Correct.
Do we have information about what they want to do with that money?
Through you, Mayor Heinzman, staff's understanding is that they will use that money to help finance the construction of the new building.
Okay. And also, I know in previous iterations of this, we've seen sort of a layout and design for the rezoned property, but there's no drawings included in the rezoning tonight. Has it changed in terms of its layout or massing?
For you, Mayor, we do have some very preliminary drawings, but because, there's still quite a bit of year and they're quite undeveloped, we decided to focus on the zoning and our development permit area guidelines, which will then guide the development.
Was the assessment done as on the gifted land or as market value land? The assessment for maybe this is
Market
another.
value.
Thank you. So $3 million is being given to the seniors housing, which allows them to get a mortgage to build. Polygon is going to build the property though?
Through you, Mayor, so the $3.6 million is in addition to the fair market value that has been agreed upon between the developer and the Squamish Senior Citizens Housing Society. So the fair market value
So it'll be mortgage-free built for them.
No.
Oh,
BC
mortgage.
Housing is coming in with a significant contribution and mortgage.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, clarification? I only have a concern, and I would suggest we do only first reading. I always have a concern when public information meetings happen after second reading, because I think you're having the meeting to have a conversation with the community, so to have second reading before you've had that public information meeting, that always doesn't sit right with me. So that's one comment. Just as another comment, I'm trying to grapple with the idea of all the CACs going to the Seniors Housing Society. I understand they have a serious capital cost they have to incur. However, we have, the voluntary community men contributions are there for purpose so that we can help with general growth. And this is a fair market growth project in the downtown. And so I'm concerned that the CACs are already theoretically allocated. We have so many different things we need to spend money on in the district, realizing seniors housing is valuable. The rezoning is what's creating the value in the land. So I think that's a significant contribution should this move forward regardless. So I'm not decided, I just have a challenge with all the CACs going to that. I would like to see purpose-built rental in this, market and market. Development proposal, I'm just talking about rezoning application at this point. but I am willing to see it go to first reading. Councillor Spell.
I would agree with those comments completely. I would be willing to let it go to first reading, but I would like to see market housing have rental housing in it as well, and I don't see any issues with having non-market housing in the 6-story market housing building. I'm not sure why with rezoning we wouldn't have we wouldn't create the same value for the community in those units. Even if it's less, I understand it's a financial.
Could I respond to that? So we've had extensive discussions with the applicant around this, including some affordable or even just market rental in the market side. And our understanding is that the proposal is to allocate all of the CACs to maximize the CACs in the senior side, and that there may not be an opportunity without that cash contribution going to the seniors, and nothing related to CACs in this side other than the park, there may not be a project there. From a BC housing funding perspective as well, like all that money is necessary to put to that project.
Councillor Rice.
Yeah, my recollection of previous discussions was that it was part of the capital cost of the new seniors building. I take the mayor's point about it is council that decides where these amenities go, amenity contributions go, and we do have policy that lays out some for housing and some for community and so forth. But I look at this as kind of a unique development, and it is a private organization. I don't want to get too prescriptive and tell them how to run their society. I don't think that's really our place. I think our position is to look at the land use and acknowledge, I think, that they are taking a piece of land that at the moment is practically zoned to the land use contract for seniors housing, and leveraging that to get a significantly higher capacity senior development. And without that leverage and ability to leverage, we would not get the new building for the seniors. I think that's just the reality of it. And we have to accept that. And I think, if we really do care about housing for vulnerable people and our housing policies, we may have to bend a little bit on some things. And I don't think that's really going to hurt us to do that. So I don't have a problem with the amenity contribution entirely in cash. Keep in mind that through our policies, if we started putting in sub-market housing in the market building, that reduces that cash significantly very quickly. And so I can understand why this would be an entirely market development that's before us tonight, to maximize the cash that would go into the seniors building, because I'm sure you never finance for 100%. That just isn't the reality. So I can see that being an essential ingredient to this. And so I wouldn't want to mess with that formula too much.
Any other questions or comments, Councillor Spell?
It'd be really, the financing, somebody saying it's not possible versus looking at all the financing and understanding it's not possible. This is a big rezoning because this land was allocated for seniors housing. And I love the project, don't get me wrong. I would like to see seniors housing built in this town. It's an essential thing that needs to happen. And I understand the market forces in place here that it's needed to build the 200 units. But I also would, unless I have finances, that's a pretty large square of market housing. And our market housing is expensive these days. And so, I don't mind making a profit off building this project, but because this is a trade of seniors' land, I'd like to know how much profit, because we have to decide about rezoning a piece of land that is supposed to be for the future of our seniors' housing. And I do completely understand that it will have to be a private-public partnership in order to get that built, but to ask for a few units of rental housing that's also at market doesn't seem unreasonable. and to ask for a few units of below market housing as well doesn't seem unreasonable. And I asked for those until, if I got finances and it looked tight, I would be able to make those decisions. But in the absence of those finances, I would ask that there be more of a give on a massive 6-story market condo complex. Because these are, our condos, some of our condos are being sold for $1 million each. And they definitely, and I know it's expensive to build housing, but it seems reasonable to extract a little bit from the upzoning of the land, even though it's being sold, I'm sure it's being sold at a reasonable market price as well. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't ask for a little bit more without the finances.
Councillor Elliott.
I was going to move the staff recommendation of first and second reading.
Is there a seconder for first and second reading? Seconded by Councillor Weiss.
So I think this proposal makes sense to me, and I think that the allocation of the CACs to the Seniors Housing Society makes a lot of sense. The more they can pay down the mortgage, the better it is for them. I think the longer we wait, the more BC Housing will decide to take their money and go to a community that wants to build 262 units of seniors housing. I think most communities would be bending over backwards to have this built. And, listening earlier to Chris Lewis talk about like their role in Squamish Nation is to look after their elders and their children. And this goes a long way in helping us look after our elders who are living in substandard conditions in the current buildings. They need to move. Those buildings are falling apart. The faster we do this, the better. I think we've done our due diligence. This makes sense to me. The Seniors Housing Society is happy with the deal. BC Housing is happy with the deal. And they said when they were here that there's not a lot of tolerance for this to go much longer or stressed more in terms of the financial capacity of the Senior Citizens Housing Society. So I'm happy to support first and second reading, and I'll attend the information meeting and look forward to the public hearing.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of those comments. I really appreciate the fact that the Seniors Housing Society went out and did their due diligence and went out and did their financial assessment. I wish that I had that in front of me to make a better decision. I will vote in favor of first and second reading and look forward to public hearing. And I appreciate the applicants working on this deal with the Seniors Housing Society as well. The fact that BC Housing is in support of it goes a long way for me. It's the mass of the market housing that really I want to hear from the public if the public feels like it's appropriate. But it's not only our seniors. I consider all of it seniors housing because it's all going to be walkable. It's all going to be in the same seniors area. Not all seniors need subsidized housing. So I consider most of this seniors housing. It'd just be nice to have some for low-income members of our society as well, because it's also it's also our responsibility to take care of low-income members of our town, and not just the seniors, but to provide a few little units of low-income housing and family units possibly for people that can't afford non-subsidized housing, which we are lacking in the same way that we're lacking seniors housing. So, even if it was a few units, I'm not expecting it to meet our policy in any way, but a few units outside of market housing would be nice.
Councillor Weiss, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I'm supporting first and second reading. I think that is the best way to go in this. With respect to previous comments, I think the public information meeting and the public hearing for me are two different functions. And so I don't care that they happen both after second reading. It is concerning to me actually to request that the proponent produce financial statements and so forth. I don't think, frankly, that's any of our business. We are a government, we regulate land use, but we are not entitled to look into a private company's books. And it doesn't matter. We don't ask that of anybody else. I've never, since I've been in council, seen a request for that kind of information come out of a zoning application. I know some municipalities have tried it, it just doesn't work with pro formas and so forth and basing amenity contribution on the lift. And it just generally is not a sustainable model. So I don't want to go there. I think the decision before us is the land use of that particular site. We know, and the amenity contribution where that's going to, and that's it. And I'm prepared to support this on that basis at this point and let it go to public hearing.
Thank you. I'm not going to support first and second reading. I'm generally supportive of the project. I'm very open to it. I'm open to all aspects of it. But I do find it disingenuous to go to a public information meeting prior to second reading. Second reading is the reading that is presented at the public hearing. And I actually think it jeopardizes the project if a whole bunch of information feedback comes to the developer at the public information meeting and that is not included as part of the consideration of second reading. I think actually could jeopardize the project. We've seen it happen before. If first and second reading doesn't succeed, I will propose first reading and come back for second reading in September after public information meeting has been held. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? No hands opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Moving on. District Squamish Land Use Contract Termination, Squamish Senior Citizens Housing Society Bylaw 2621. Do you need to do a report on this, Jesse, or?
No.
I'll move first and second reading. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Race. Any comments? It'll be nice when all these land use contracts are finally done with. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.